Hey guys, I can't tell you how excited I am hosting this episode number 200. Really, guys, consistently making podcasts is a really tough thing. Twice a week, recording an episode is even tougher. And I'm so proud of myself. I'm so proud of the team, especially Jana, for supporting the podcast, especially the podcast outcome in the last 2 years, almost 2 years. It's amazing, guys. I just can't say it often enough. Be patient, be consistent, and sometimes even if you struggle, just keep on going and record that damn episode. And I sometimes even share it with you if I'm not happy with it, or I don't know, I struggle because I had a bad day or I have some bad moments or I'm just not healthy. Still, I recorded an episode. And if you are planning on doing your own podcast or you already have your own podcast, I can only say it again. Keep recording, keep going. It's fun and it will definitely pay out. And today, episode number 200, and I would say the three most supportive people behind that podcast are Lucas, the one I started it with 2 years ago, Jana, because she keeps on posting, she keeps on supporting, she keeps on giving input and stuff, and you, the listeners, the loyal listeners, because if you won't share your experience, the things you need, the things you're interested in, it won't fuel my energy that much. I still love what I'm doing, and it's so much fun to read all those newspapers, those newsletters every single week. But of course, it's so much cooler if I know that there are people outside who are really interested in the content I'm sharing. So thanks for the support. And talking about support, without my partner, Stephanie, big shout out to you. I know that you need so much tolerance for a guy that is, I don't know, talking about wine, beer, drinks, alcohol-free stuff the whole week and at least dedicating 20 something hours for a podcast every single week. No matter if you're traveling, if you're on holidays, if you have a birthday party, or you're just working. I really love the support. Thank you so much for that. And without those tolerance, it won't be possible in a way that it is today. Thank you very much to everybody out there supporting this. And if you want to support this podcast one more time, share it with a friend, with a colleague who might be interested in this content. And right now, we start in episode number 200. Half of it is dedicated to beer. The Oktoberfest has revealed their annual data, or let's say the data of the last 3 weeks, because basically it's the same with the annual data. And we will talk about some big, major deals when it comes to champagne brands, luxury brands in champagne. Have fun with episode number 200. Welcome to the Pinot Pixel podcast episode number 200. 200. Anniversary party. Thank you very much again for supporting this podcast. And it is not the only anniversary in this month, in October 2024. There is another one, and we have already talked about that. Sideways, the movie in the wine industry when it comes to wine, when it comes to stories, and also when it comes to the impact a movie can make on the wine industry. Sideways will have its 20th anniversary on October 22nd, 2024. And how in the world can you celebrate anniversary? And an anniversary like that, you host a tasting. And this is what we're going to do October 22nd in Freising. This is near München. Quite small, familiar tasting with a group of maybe 20 people. If you're interested in, I put the link in the show notes. It's also on pinotpixel.com/sideways. If you want to order your ticket, please do so. We will have a tasting of course, Pinot Noirs, of Merlots from Australia, from the United States, of course, from Central Europe. We will compare them against each other. We will have some great sparkling wines I really like, my personal picks, and I guess most of the wines will have a relation to the movie. And of course, there will be a screening of the movie. Sure. So if you are free on Tuesday, October 22nd, we will start at 7 p.m. in Freising in the Esszimmer. Happily invited. Link is in the show notes. And if you are interested in the story and the impact the movie had on the wine industry, I can highly recommend the podcast episode I recorded basically in Santa Barbara, in the area where Sideways was recorded. And this article from San Francisco Gate also talks about it, how a single movie turned a sleepy Californian wine region into a major travel destination. And I mean, I can't tell that often enough. It's so amazing and also surprising how a single wine movie can change a whole industry. You can still see the impact the movie had on Pinot Noir sales, the rise, the peak, and the drop of Merlot sales. And just because Miles, the main actor, was a big fan of Pinot Noir, I mean, he knows what the best variety might be on the planet. And he is not a fan at all of Merlot. And the only reason for that is because his ex-wife was a big fan of Merlot and he just stopped loving it and kept talking about it during the whole movie. And the world, I would say, most famous wine quote still is, if anyone orders Merlot, I'm leaving. I'm not drinking any fucking Merlot. And the rest is history, and the rest you will be able to see on October 22nd if you join our great Sideways party. The link of this article is in the show notes. The next four articles are dedicated to the beer industry and closely related to the episode 199 I recorded on alcohol-free beer. Because, I mean, I live in Germany. The podcast is hosted in Germany, and many news, especially when it comes to alcohol-free beer, but also beer, are focused on the German market, because Germany is the most mature market when it comes to alcohol-free drinks, especially alcohol-free beer, because every 10th beer in Germany is alcohol-free. Last week, we talked about the worldwide success of alcohol-free beer and which market might be the most interesting when it comes to companies or brands that want to enter the alcohol-free market. And one of them was the US. But when we focus on what is already quite matured, where is alcohol-free beer already accepted, a study of Statista Consumer Insights found out that Spain is the market where the biggest amount of people in a survey said, yes, I regularly drink alcohol-free beer. 21%, every fifth Spanish person said that they regularly consume alcohol-free beer. Isn't that interesting? And of course, I didn't know that Spain is so interested in beer. They also have the highest amount of people drinking normal beer. And we have to research that. And this is what we're going to do right now. We will check how much alcohol-free beer is available in Spain. I will check that with the link of last week. So what we are going to do right now is checking Spain. The non-alcoholic beer market in Spain is considered to be $1.3 billion in 2024, which makes Spain one of the biggest alcohol-free beer markets in the world. US, 7 billion, China, 7 billion, and Spain is one of the following ones. And this is super exciting, super interesting. And if you want to know what the share of alcohol-free beer is right now, we see that the amount of alcohol-free beer is expected to be 250 million liters. And when we switch that to beer right now, so 250 million, we keep that in mind. The total market of beer and alcohol-free beer is said to be 4.1 billion. So 6%. Every 16th beer in Spain is alcohol-free, and that is quite big. And this is what this study showed. Second place is Germany with 15% of the average ask people, a person that says I regularly drink alcohol-free beer. And then we have China on the list, we have India on the list. And the interesting fact, but this is also referencing to the numbers we had last week, only 5% of the Americans in that study said that they're regularly drinking alcohol-free beer. And if you remember it, the US only has a 1% share in alcohol-free when it comes to the volume of beer in general. So meaning if you have a brand that is already producing alcohol-free beer, you should maybe focus, if you're located in Central Europe, also on the Spanish market, because Spain is a beer country. They are interested in beer and maybe also in the alternatives without alcohol. It's the same with Italy, by the way, also seen as a beer country in that study. I put the link in the show notes so you can browse through all the countries that are really mentioned, especially with the big percentages of alcohol-free beer. And jumping on that train is one of the most famous brands, German brands, when it comes to alcohol-free beer. Erdinger. I guess Erdinger Weißbräu, Erdinger Weißbier, alcohol-free, is one of the most famous in Central Europe. They even managed not only to be famous for the Weißbier, but also for being closely related to sports events. Once you finish the marathon, the probability that you can have an alcohol-free Erdinger after the finish line is actually quite high, because I would say 20 to 30% of the marathons I took part in usually were sponsored by Erdinger, and they managed to be very, very present in the German and also in the international market, especially when it comes to alcohol-free beer. And right now, they have a lager. Many customers asked for it, many markets asked for it, and right now they will offer Erdinger Brauhaus Hell, a lager, from 2025, available in many stores in Germany in the 0.5 liter bottle. And this brings one more product for Erdinger into the market, and also maybe a bigger visibility as well, because if you are not a fan of Weissbier, if you are not a fan of wheat beer and you don't like the taste, then it might be an option to choose the lager right now, because the market, especially for lager, for Mexican lager, and also for stouts, is bigger. The IPA section is gaining traction because people are into the craft beer styles. And if you are a fan of wheat beer, usually your first pick would probably be Erdinger in Central Europe. And right now, you can have your Erdinger lager available from 2025 in many stores, especially in Germany. It's a bold move. It totally makes sense. I don't know if I would relate the brand of Erdinger to a normal beer, to a lager, but maybe they managed to also bring this to the market and people are interested in that, and they can build a new part of the brand or even establish their brand generally for good alcohol-free beer. Talking about the success of alcohol-free beer has seen a significant growth across Europe. There has been a study, a survey of Foodora, quite present in many markets, and looking at the numbers, the alcohol-free beer orders grew by over 16% across Europe in summer 2024, outpaced traditional beer. Central Europe region are inclining in drinks in alcohol-free versus the Nordics. Oktoberfest celebrations kicked off and also brought an impact on the alcohol-free market. We will talk about the numbers of the Oktoberfest in a second. They have been published recently, and they were very successful, not only when it comes to visitors, but also beer and non-alcoholic beer sales. And these findings from the study, they show the expected growth of the alcohol-free market, not only beer, but I mean, this is focused on beer, but generally the growing interest in alcohol-free products. And if you haven't considered bringing alcohol-free products into your portfolio, adding up when you have a restaurant, when you have a hotel, generally in hospitality, or you have a special retail or just a retail shop, you should definitely consider it right now. It's getting traction and it's a huge business opportunity as well. People are interested, and I mean, October is currently running. Dry January is coming in a couple of months, but those are not the main drivers anymore. It's a whole generation that is not interested in alcohol-free anymore. The technology changed so much in a good way that you are able to produce high quality, very tasty alcohol-free products that can suit a menu, that can replace your regular alcohol drink. Why not try it? And this is what most people say, and this is why you should add up alcohol-free drinks to your portfolio. If you're interested in that, hit me up at podcast@pinotpixel.com, and we talk about opportunities, challenges, and possibilities for your company. And the latest proof of the interest, the growing interest in alcohol-free products, was Oktoberfest. They published their key figures. The Wiesen 2024 said, we were quite successful compared to 2023. There were fewer visitors, talking about 6.7 million visitors compared to 2023 with 7.2, so they lost 500,000. Nevertheless, they were satisfied with the visitors. 7 million liters of beer were given out. It's a bit less in 2023 as well, 7.4 in 2023. 9% more food sold in 2023. And I mean, if you have followed the news on the rise of the food products where organically grown chicken was $30, I guess the biggest part of the growth in food is caused by the more expensive foods. They reported 3,500 lost property items. And the good thing is about the Wiesn, 29% fewer patients at the ambulance station, meaning people really drank more responsibly. I mean, still interested in beer, still interested in partying. Maybe something is generally changing. There was more water available, and unfortunately, they didn't share that, but I would have been super interested in how much water people drank, because there were free water serving stations all over Oktoberfest. I guess it was 4 or 6 or so. Super cool and exciting to hear. When I guess this was announced in April or so, and I really like that. Another positive fact, the police realized a decrease of 25.8% in criminal offenses. So again, positive impact, maybe through press, maybe through a change in society. But this is definitely good news from the Oktoberfest. And talking about good news, the most interesting stuff for me was how big was the share of the alcohol-free products. And of course, there was a growing interest in water, in Spezi, so the Coke and lemonade mixture, lemonade juices stuff, and 5% of the beer was alcohol-free. So there is a growing interest in alcohol-free beer. And funny enough, the price is the same, like the ones with alcohol, still growing and 5% plus. From successful beer news to the wine industry, and the first really big announcement this week was a $1 billion deal of the Formula One with luxury brand LVMH. And we talked about LVMH last week, and we will reference this back in a second. But this is a really bold move because it's the first 10-year contract that has ever been made with a brand when it comes to Formula One. And of course, Bernard Arnault is quite happy with that deal. The next 10 years, he will support the whole Formula One with his big brands, Tag Heuer, Moet Hennessy, Louis Vuitton in the Formula One. So we will see them for the next 10 years. And there is still speculations on the deal size, on the deal rules behind. It's speculated to be approximately 1 billion. And it's also speculated that Moet will replace Ferrari Trento Doc during the celebration ceremony. We talked about that last year in the podcast. And it's also speculated that Rolex will be replaced by Tag Heuer. So this is big news for LVMH, for the company that has been suffering quite a lot with sales, especially when it comes to wine and spirits over the last 6 months. We talked about that as well. And this could change everything over the next 10 years. Big supporter in the Formula One. And of course, I mean, Hamilton is one of the guys. We talked about that as well with his brand Almavi. He also made it into the Formula One. So we will see more wine, more spirits, and more alcohol-free drinks in the Formula One in the next 3 to 5 years. Definitely. Talking about sparkling and successful champagne brands, Taittinger. Last week, we had the announcement that the family-related business with the alcohol-free brand French Bloom was shares acquired by LVMH because Taittinger itself, the champagne company, wasn't interested in alcohol-free products. What they are definitely interested in is English sparkling wine, because England is one of the rising countries when it comes to sparkling wine. I mean, most of us know this through this podcast and maybe some other news as well. And 2015, Taittinger bought an estate, or at least some vineyards over there, planted vines over there in 2017. And the first product was released last week. Big announcement. The first champagne-backed product in England by Champagne Taittinger. The domain is called Domaine Evremont or Evermond. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. It's a bit weird to see a French brand investing in an English-speaking country and then keeping the French name for the company. We will call it Domaine Evremont. And they released the first product. It's Domaine Evremont Classique Cuvée based on Taittinger's Californian Blanc de Blanc. So the idea, the bottle design, everything was imported from the US. And I already saw some friends and colleagues on Instagram that were invited to taste the product, and I will talk to them in a couple of days and see. Maybe I will also be able to try that. Definitely, it was a big announcement. First champagne brand that invested, or one of the first brands that invested in English sparkling in the English wine industry. And there will be many more coming because it is a rising market. And people are interested in English sparkling because I would say 80% of the market is high quality. It's closely related to quality. It's the same with champagne. And the only difficulty is to bring the stuff to Europe. I mean, Brexit was part of it, and imports, duty fees, stuff like that. And also the popularity is still not how you would expect it and how brands would love to have it. Scandinavia already managed to understand the English sparkling or the English wine market. And if you want to know what English sparkling or the English wine industry can give you, hit me up at podcast@pinotpixel.com because there will be a wine trip. The annual wine trip this year is happening around Bristol and the area of Wales. We will visit some wineries, we will visit some producers and closely related companies to the wine industry, cheese factories, tonnelleries, stuff like that. So if you're interested in that, hit me up at podcast@pinotpixel.com or have a look at pinotpixel.com/UK. There is still some spaces available if you want to join our wine trip to England in November. The next news is from Bordeaux. We stay in France. Maybe we jump over from England to France. The European Union has finally granted the $120 million funding for the vine pulling plan. And the first companies, the first wineries have already entered the registration process for the 4,000 hectares you can get for 1 hectare pulled out wines. And I had this chat with a friend yesterday, and he asked me, how do you ensure that not some people are just pulling out the money and then, of course, replanting vines or stuff like that? I think it's not a super easy process. And usually I would say you would only enter this registration process for the pull-out scheme if your winery, your company is really struggling. So saying, I don't know, I have 10 hectares, I have to replant, I enter the competition or the registration would be a bad idea, I would say. And I guess 4,000 euro, we talked about that, is not super much for 1 hectare, but at least it will try to help you doing something different with 1 hectare of wine, of land. It will probably help some agriculturists in France, but this is definitely not the final solution. We will definitely get rid of some vineyards we might not need anymore in the future. Maybe this will have an impact on the prices. We will see. At least the European Union was fine with that and granted the program. And finally, my recommendation of the week, talking about Bordeaux, I listened to a podcast episode of SomTV. SomTV is one of the biggest players in the wine industry, really good podcast. And this episode is called Unclassified by Choice. And it's an interview with Yves Delaunay, who is responsible for Shoutout Angelus. And he is explaining why they left, or let me rephrase that, why they didn't choose to take part in the reclassification of the chateaus in 2022, because it was a very, very big announcement, a big thing for the wine industry that Angelus didn't take part in that and left the classification, and many wineries followed those steps. And he clarifies the backgrounds, he talks about the reasons, he talks about the future and why they did that. And it is really interesting. It's also interesting, especially I found it interesting because you get a deeper dive into the classification system of the left and right bank of Bordeaux, and you are able to understand how this classification impacts the industry and why more and more wineries are choosing to not being part of the classification. So I highly recommend this episode. The link is in the show notes. Generally, this is one of the best wine podcasts on the planet besides your Pinot Pixel podcast. So yeah. Guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting this podcast for the last 200 episodes, or at least the support since you have entered this podcast. Do me a favor, recommend this podcast to a friend who might be interested in the content of this podcast. I wish you a fantastic weekend. We see each other on Wednesday. Ciao, ciao.